My parents. They left me nothing. At their funeral, the lawyer read the will. My brothers and sisters leaned forward, waiting to hear their fortunes. When my name came up, everyone turned to look at me. The lawyer's voice was cold. To our daughter, we leave only our prayers. Gasps echoed through the room. My siblings smirked, whispering behind their hands. I sat frozen, humiliated, forgotten, disowned. But what I discovered next changed everything. I grew up believing family meant loyalty. That love was stronger than gold. My parents had 6 children, 4 boys, 2 girls. I was the youngest, the quiet one. The one they always said would figure things out someday. We lived in a grand house in the countryside. My father was a stern man, always in his office, building his businesses. My mother was graceful, proud, a woman who loved to host parties and show off her successful children. My brothers were golden in their eyes. James, the eldest, became a doctor. Philip, a lawyer. Andrew, a banker. Robert, the one with charisma, started his own company. My sister Margaret was ambitious too, married well, had children early, became my mother's shadow. And then, there was me. I wasn't ambitious, not in their way. I loved books, I loved music. I loved walking in the fields behind our home and sketching the wildflowers I saw. I was gentle, quiet. And in my parents' world, quiet was weakness. Why don't you apply yourself like your brothers? My father would say at dinner, his voice sharp, each word like a slap. You'll never get anywhere daydreaming. My mother added, sipping her wine, her eyes sliding away from me like I wasn't even worth the effort. I tried. God knows I tried. I studied. I worked hard in school. I helped around the house. I sat by my mother's bedside when she was ill while my siblings were too busy chasing their successes. But none of it mattered. To them, my worth was measured in titles, salaries, status, and I had none. Still, I believed they loved me. I told myself they just don't understand me. I thought one day I'd prove myself, and they'd see me differently. But deep inside, I always felt like an outsider in my own family. It showed in the little ways. Birthdays. My brothers received expensive gifts, watches, scholarships, business loans. When it was my turn, I got a sweater. Once, my father even forgot it was my birthday. Family dinners. They bragged about their promotions, their deals, their clients. When I tried to share something like the art exhibit where my paintings were shown, they smiled politely and changed the subject. Holidays. My siblings arrived with spouses and children. My mother fussed over them, glowing with pride. I sat at the edge of the room, pouring tea, invisible. Still, I held on. I kept thinking, they're my parents, my family. They'll see my heart one day. But that day never came. I'll never forget one night, years before the funeral. I was walking down the hallway when I overheard my parents speaking. "She's too soft," my father muttered. "She'll be fine on her own," my mother replied. The others. They need our wealth to keep the family name strong. I stood frozen. My chest tightened. My throat burned. They thought I didn't need them, that I didn't deserve their help. I wanted to burst into the room and scream, "I love you more than any of them. I was there when you needed me. Why am I never enough?" But I didn't. I just stood there, silent, and carried the weight of their words alone. Years passed. My siblings grew richer, more arrogant. I built a small life of my own, a modest job, a small apartment, enough to get by, but nothing like their glittering world. And yet, I still visited. I still tried. I brought groceries when my parents grew old. I mowed the lawn. I cleaned their kitchen. My brothers never lifted a finger. My mother would smile faintly and say, "Thank you, dear." But it was empty, a courtesy. When they passed away, I grieved. Despite everything, they were my parents. I wanted to believe I mattered. I wanted to believe love was stronger than money. So when the lawyer read the will, I sat with my hands clasped, my heart pounding, waiting for proof I had been wrong all along, waiting for them to say, "We see you. We love you. You matter to us too." Instead, they gave me nothing. No house, no money. No jewelry, not even a keepsake. To our daughter, we leave only our prayers. It was as though they had buried me along with themselves. The room fell silent. Then whispers began. Did you hear that? They cut her out. She must have done something. My siblings smirked. James leaned over to Philip, whispering, Guess she really was the disappointment. My cheeks burned, my eyes filled. I wanted to disappear. But worse than the humiliation was the betrayal. After years of loyalty, sacrifice, and love, they left me nothing. And that's when I realized I had never truly been their daughter, not in the way my siblings were. I was just the extra, the one they didn't need. After the will was read, people avoided me. Some wouldn't even meet my eyes. Others gave me pitying looks, like I was a stray dog left out in the rain. My siblings walked out of that office laughing, as though my pain was a joke. Margaret turned to me and said, Well, I suppose you'll have to get a real job now. I stood there, hollow, as their laughter echoed down the hallway. That night, I sat in my tiny apartment, staring at the ceiling. I replayed every memory, every slight, every moment I was told I wasn't enough, and I broke. I cried until my chest hurt. I thought about my life, how invisible I had been, how I gave and was left with nothing. But as the tears fell, I remembered something else. An old family friend had approached me quietly after the will was read. He slipped a small envelope into my hand and whispered, Your grandmother wanted you to have this. Don't lose it. It's more valuable than you know. At first, I was too stunned to care, but now, sitting alone, I opened it. Inside was a key, old, tarnished, heavy with meaning, and a faded letter written in my grandmother's handwriting. It said only, For the one who values love over gold, this key will open the path to what truly matters. My hands trembled, my heart pounded. What could it mean? I stared at the key through my tears, whispering to myself, Why me? Why now? I almost threw it away, thinking it was just another cruel riddle, another reminder that I didn't belong. But something stopped me, a spark, a whisper inside. Maybe this is my last chance. Maybe this is what they never wanted me to find. And that's when I knew. But what I discovered next changed everything. The key sat on my table for days. I couldn't stop staring at it. Heavy, cold, mysterious. But while I tried to make sense of it, my siblings wasted no time enjoying their fortune. Just a week after the funeral, I saw it on the news. James had bought a new mansion by the lake. Margaret posted pictures online, her fingers dripping with diamonds, writing captions like, Thanks, Dad. We'll carry on the family legacy. Each post, each headline, each laugh. It was another knife twisting in my chest. And the calls started. Not from friends, not from neighbors, from my siblings. They called to mock me. James, so little sister, how does it feel knowing you weren't worth even $1 to Mom and Dad? Philip, guess all those years of playing nursemaid didn't count for much. Did they? Margaret, honestly, you should be grateful. At least you don't have the burden of responsibility. Their words were poison, sweet on the surface but dripping with venom. I tried to hang up, but their laughter echoed in my ears long after. I thought I had lost everything, but then it got worse, because money changes people, and power makes them cruel. 2 weeks after the funeral, they decided to sell the family estate, our childhood home, the place where I spent nights staring at the stars from the attic window, the place where I cared for Mother when she was sick. I begged them not to. Please, at least keep the house. It's our history, our memories. James scoffed. Memories don't pay bills. Philip smirked. Besides, what do you care? You're not part of this family anymore. Margaret leaned close, her perfume choking me, and whispered, You'll never step foot in that house again. And just like that, they locked me out. I returned one afternoon to find the gate chained, my father's garden torn apart by construction crews, trucks hauling out furniture, portraits, family heirlooms. all being auctioned for profit. I stood at the gate, gripping the cold metal, tears streaming down my face. A worker approached and said, "Sorry, miss. Orders are that you're not allowed on the property." Not allowed. From my own home. I staggered back, my chest hollow, my breath shallow. That night, I dreamed of my mother's voice, calling my name. I woke with the sound of her whisper still in my ears. I thought of the key. But before I could follow its mystery, betrayal struck again. A letter arrived in the mail. Not from my grandmother. Not from anyone kind. From Margaret. It wasn't a letter. It was a wedding invitation. For her daughter. And at the bottom, in neat script, she had written, "We thought it best if you didn't attend. After all, it might embarrass the family to have you there." I dropped the invitation. My hands shook. Embarrass the family? I was their family. But to them, I was nothing but a stain. I sat in my small apartment, the walls pressing in, my life shrinking smaller and smaller. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. Everywhere I turned, I saw their faces, their laughter, their success. And the whispers followed me. At the grocery store, I overheard neighbors. "Poor thing. Did you hear? Her parents cut her out of the will. She must have done something terrible." The shame was unbearable. I began avoiding people, taking side streets, keeping my head down. I felt like a ghost, invisible, forgotten. But not to them. No, my siblings wanted me to feel my exile. One afternoon, Philip showed up at my apartment. He leaned against the doorframe, his expensive suit sharp, his cologne choking the air. "I thought I'd come check on you," he said, his smile thin. "You know, make sure you're surviving without the family's help." I clenched my fists. "What do you want?" He stepped inside, uninvited, glancing around my small, cluttered living room. He laughed. "So, this is how the forgotten daughter lives. Pathetic. Get out." He shrugged. "Fine, I just wanted to tell you, we're selling everything. The land. The heirlooms. Even grandmother's cottage. All of it. Don't bother trying to stop us. You have no rights." The words hit me like a blow. Grandmother's cottage. The one place that had felt like home. The place where she read me stories as a child, where she told me secrets about strength and kindness. They were going to take even that. After he left, I collapsed on the floor, sobbing. That was the moment I realized I wasn't just forgotten. I was being erased, and I couldn't let them do it. I clutched the old key. My grandmother's words burned in my mind. "For the one who values love over gold, this key will open the path to what truly matters." But before I could follow its trail, I sank deeper. Because betrayal wasn't finished with me yet. At Margaret's daughter's wedding, they spread lies. I wasn't there, but neighbors told me later. They stood in their glittering gowns, their diamond rings flashing, and when someone asked where I was, James smirked and said, "Oh, she's in rehab. She couldn't handle life without Mommy and Daddy's money." Laughter erupted. Guests whispered, and just like that, my name was dragged through the mud. Rehab. A lie, a cruel fabrication, but once spoken, it stuck. Suddenly, people avoided me not just out of pity, but suspicion. Employers looked at me differently. Friends stopped calling. Even church members whispered when I walked by. They weren't satisfied with taking my inheritance. They wanted to take my dignity, too. I remember one night sitting at my kitchen table with the invitation still crumpled in my hands. My reflection in the window looked like a stranger. Hollow eyes, trembling lips. I whispered to myself, "Why do they hate me so much? What did I ever do to deserve this?" And in the silence, no answer came. The weight of betrayal crushed me. I thought about giving up, about disappearing entirely. But then I remembered her, my grandmother, her hands soft, her eyes wise, the way she had once looked at me and said, "You are stronger than they know. One day they'll see it too." And I thought of the key again. It was the only thing left that tied me to her, the only piece of my past not stolen by greed. So one morning, with the sun rising pale and cold, I packed a bag. I took the key. And I went to find out where it led. What I discovered that day was the beginning of everything. But first, let me tell you how far my siblings' betrayal went. Because they weren't done breaking me. Not yet. When I reached the cottage, I saw a for sale sign planted in the front yard. My heart nearly stopped. I ran to the door. Locked. Hands shaking, I pulled out the key. It slid into the lock as though it had been waiting for me all along. The door creaked open. Dust filled the air, the smell of old wood and memories. I stepped inside, and what I found in that cottage would change my life forever. But while I stood in awe, my siblings were plotting their final humiliation. They weren't just selling the cottage, they planned to tear it down, replace it with luxury villas, and they wanted me there, not to save it, but to watch it burn. The cottage smelled like dust and forgotten summers. I stepped across the creaking floorboards, my heart pounding in my chest. Light filtered through torn curtains, falling on stacks of old boxes and furniture draped in white sheets. This was my grandmother's place, her secret world. I remembered sitting by the fireplace as a child, her voice soft as she read stories about justice, about patience, about how truth always rises, no matter how deep it's buried. Now here I was, buried myself, and the key had brought me here. I set my bag down and pulled the sheets away. Dust swirled in the air, stinging my eyes. There were trunks. Journals. Old photographs. I opened the first trunk. Inside were letters, hundreds of them, tied neatly with ribbon, my grandmother's handwriting. My hands shook as I untied the first bundle. "Dearest child," it began, "if you are reading this, then the world has shown you its cruelty. But do not despair. I have hidden in these walls more than memories. I have hidden truth, truth that cannot be silenced." I gasped. The paper trembled in my fingers. Truth? I tore through the trunk. Letters, documents, deeds, bank statements, names of accounts, all of it carefully preserved, and what they revealed made my blood run cold. My siblings. The golden children, the heirs. They weren't heroes, they were liars, thieves, parasites. James, the doctor, had taken bribes from pharmaceutical companies. Philip had laundered money through his law firm. Robert's company was built on fraud. Even Margaret's husband had debts hidden beneath layers of deception. And my parents, they knew. They knew and protected them, covered their sins, fed their greed. All the while, they told me I wasn't worth anything. I sank to my knees. Tears blurred my vision. It wasn't that I wasn't good enough. It was that I was the only one they couldn't control, the only one who wouldn't play their corrupt games, the only one my grandmother trusted. I sobbed into my hands. My whole life, I thought I was the disappointment, the mistake, the outsider. But the truth was the opposite. I was the only one who hadn't betrayed her, and that's why she left me the key. I stayed in the cottage for hours, rifling through boxes. Each discovery was a dagger and a bomb at the same time. Proof of betrayal. Proof of my worth. I found a final note tucked inside a book. "Child, the world will not hand you justice. You must take it. But do not use this knowledge to destroy yourself. Use it to reveal what they are. That will be their undoing." Her words burned into me. Reveal what they are. I could see it clearly now. Their downfall was already in these papers. But at that moment, I was still broken, because the betrayal hadn't stopped. A week later, I received an invitation. Not a kind one. A summons. My siblings wanted me at a family meeting. When I arrived, they were gathered in a fancy hotel lounge, dressed in silk and gold, glasses of champagne in their hands. James grinned. "Ah, the forgotten one joins us." Margaret smirked. "We thought you might like to say goodbye to grandmother's cottage before it's demolished." Philip raised his glass. "Luxury villas. We'll make millions. And you? You can watch it crumble." My chest tightened. My breath caught. I whispered, "You can't. It's her legacy." Robert laughed. "Legacy doesn't pay dividends. Don't get emotional. It never suited you." They all laughed in my face. I stood there, trembling, clutching the strap of my worn bag. They didn't know what I carried inside. The documents, the proof, the weapon. But I wasn't ready. Not yet. I walked out, their laughter echoing after me like knives in the dark. That night, I broke down again. I screamed into my pillow. I threw a glass against the wall, shattering it into 1,000 pieces. I collapsed to the floor, whispering, "Why me? Why always me?" For hours I lay there, broken. But then, something shifted. I remembered my grandmother's words. "The world will not hand you justice. You must take it." The fire lit inside me. I wiped my tears, picked up the shards of glass, stared at my reflection in the mirror. For the first time, I didn't see weakness. I saw anger. I saw resolve. I whispered to myself, "They think I'm nothing. They think they've won. But they don't know. I have everything I need to destroy them. The papers, the deeds, the evidence, and the truth." That night, I spread the documents across my kitchen table. Bank records, fraudulent contracts, letters of corruption. Piece by piece, I put the puzzle together. It wasn't just about humiliation anymore. It was about justice. I began writing, organizing, creating a story that could not be denied. But I knew I couldn't do it alone. I needed allies. So I reached out, quietly, carefully. An old family lawyer, long retired, who still remembered my grandmother fondly. A journalist who once exposed a scandal in my brother's company. A neighbor who had been cheated by my sister's husband. Each one listened. Each one agreed. I wasn't alone anymore. And with every person who joined me, my confidence grew. I was no longer the forgotten daughter. I was the keeper of the truth, the weapon they could never see coming. But I kept it hidden. I played my role. When Margaret called to gloat about the demolition date for the cottage, I pretended to cry. When Philip sent me mocking texts, I didn't reply. When James bragged about his new vacation home, I said nothing. They thought I was broken, but I was building something they would never recover from. Still, doubt crept in at night. What if I failed? What if no one believed me? I'd stare at the key on my nightstand. The key that opened the door to the truth, and I'd whisper to my grandmother, "Please, give me strength." And somehow I felt her with me, guiding me, fueling me. The night before the demolition, I stood in the cottage one last time. The papers were hidden safely. The allies were ready. I touched the walls, the fireplace, the window where I once watched fireflies. I whispered, "I promise. They will pay for this." And as the wind howled outside, I felt it. The turning point, the moment I stopped being their victim and became their reckoning. The morning of the demolition, the sky was gray, heavy, as if it knew what was about to happen. I stood in front of the cottage, the wind whipping my hair, my bag clutched tight against my chest. Inside that bag wasn't just paper, it was dynamite, truth, waiting to explode. The bulldozers roared in the distance. My siblings arrived in sleek cars, engines purring like beasts. They stepped out dressed like royalty, Margaret in pearls, James in a tailored suit, Philip with a smug grin. Robert lighting a cigar as if the land already belonged to him. I kept my eyes down, letting them think I was small, invisible. Margaret leaned close, her perfume suffocating. "Don't cry, dear. Think of it this way. You never really belonged here anyway." Her words sliced through me, but I didn't cry. Not this time. Instead, I smiled. Just a little. Enough to unsettle her, because she didn't know what was coming. As the demolition crew prepared, I pulled out my phone, sent one message, one single word, "Now." And then I waited. At first, nothing happened. My siblings laughed, glasses of champagne clinking. James boasted about his hospital wing. Philip whispered about stock deals. Robert bragged about his company's next big move. But then, phones began buzzing. 1, 2, 3, all at once. Margaret frowned, pulling out hers. James muttered, "What the hell?" Philip's smile vanished. Robert dropped his cigar. I watched, silent, because I knew what they were seeing. Headlines, articles, exposés. My allies had struck. The journalist released the story at dawn. The Golden family's rotten core, fraud, corruption, and betrayal. Page after page laid out their sins. Bank records, signed contracts, witness testimonies, even photographs. It was undeniable, irrefutable, and all of it tied to their names. James's bribes, Philip's laundering, Robert's fraud, Margaret's husband's debts. Every rotten secret they thought buried was now screaming across every screen. Live. Viral. James stammered, "No, this is fake. It has to be fake." Philip's face turned white. "Where did they get this?" Margaret's hand trembled, pearls shaking around her neck. Robert cursed, his cigar snapping in half. I stood there, calm, watching them unravel. Then my phone buzzed. A message from the lawyer. "It's done. The deeds are filed. The cottage is yours. Legally. Permanently. They can't touch it." My knees almost buckled. It was over. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. Because revenge is not just about winning. It's about watching them lose. And so I stepped forward, my voice steady, my hands no longer shaking. "Do you know what the worst part is?" I said. They all turned, faces pale, eyes wide. "The worst part is that you thought I was weak, that I would just disappear while you stole everything. But you forgot one thing," James whispered. "What?" I leaned closer. My words were ice. "Grandmother trusted me, not you. Me. And now the world knows why." Their faces crumbled. Margaret tried to lunge toward me, but reporters had already arrived, dozens of them, cameras flashing. My journalist ally had tipped them off, microphones shoved in faces, questions flying like arrows. "Is it true your company laundered millions, Mr. Philip?" "Dr. James." "Did you take illegal kickbacks for prescribing drugs?" "Robert, can you explain the fraudulent contracts?" "Mrs. Margaret, how do you feel about your husband's debts being exposed?" Chaos. They stumbled, stammered, shouted, but there was no escape. Every lens captured their downfall, and I stood tall. For the first time in my life, I wasn't invisible. I was the storm. Reporters turned to me. "Ma'am, how do you feel about this?" I smiled softly. I feel like my grandmother's voice has finally been heard. The cameras caught it, the perfect line, the perfect ending. But for my siblings, it was the beginning of their end. That night, the fallout spread like wildfire. James was suspended from his hospital board, his name dragged through medical journals. Philip's law firm partners abandoned him, terrified of being tied to the scandal. Robert's investors pulled out, his empire collapsing overnight. Margaret's husband disappeared, leaving her with nothing but debts. And my parents? For the first time in their lives, they couldn't protect their favorites. Their phone lines rang nonstop with reporters. Their names, once polished, were now stained. They tried calling me, again and again, but I didn't answer. Instead, I sat in the cottage, the fire crackling. My grandmother's letters spread before me, and I whispered, "We did it." But revenge has a way of lingering. The next week, my siblings showed up at my door. Not in silk, not in gold, but in shame. James with hollow eyes, Philip with shaking hands, Robert with no cigar, no swagger, Margaret with tears streaking her makeup. They begged. "Please," James said, "help us fix this. You can make a statement. Say it's a misunderstanding." Philip added, "We're family. Don't destroy us." Robert gritted his teeth. "You don't understand what you've done." Margaret sobbed. "You'll regret this. You'll regret everything." I let them speak. I let them beg, and then I closed the door. Slow, firm, click. Their voices muffled, swallowed by the night. I leaned against the wood, tears sliding down my cheeks. Not from pain, from release, from justice. For once, I wasn't the forgotten one. I was the one who remembered, the one who carried the truth, and the one who won. The next morning, the papers called it poetic justice, the forgotten daughter rising from the ashes. But for me, it wasn't about headlines. It was about finally breathing, finally standing in the sun without their shadows over me. Revenge hadn't made me cruel, it had made me whole. And as I looked out at the cottage, safe and standing, I knew this was only the beginning, because they thought they buried me. But I was the seed, and now I had grown into something they could never cut down. The days after the storm felt quiet. For the first time in years, my phone didn't buzz with insults disguised as family advice. No messages telling me to be grateful for scraps. No reminders that I was the unworthy one. Silence. And in that silence, I found something I hadn't felt since I was a child in my grandmother's arms. Peace. The cottage smelled of cedar and wildflowers. The floors creaked the same way they did when she walked them. And every letter, every note she had left me, whispered the same truth. You matter. Even if they don't see it, you matter. I read those words every morning by the fire, letting them sink into the scars my parents and siblings had carved into me. Because healing doesn't happen overnight. But revenge had given me space to breathe, to begin. Meanwhile, my siblings' world kept crumbling. James sold his mansion to pay legal fees. The hospital revoked his license pending investigation. He went from boasting on television to hiding from cameras in just a week. Philip's face appeared on every news channel, not as a respected lawyer, but as the man who betrayed his clients. His firm stripped his name from the walls, leaving him a ghost in his own building. Robert lost everything overnight. Contracts canceled, investors gone. The man who once smoked cigars on balconies now pawned his watches just to keep afloat. And Margaret? She disappeared. Whispers said she moved out of state, chasing a husband who no longer wanted her. The mighty had fallen. But I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Their downfall wasn't my victory. My victory was survival. My victory was this home. Still, one last chapter remained, because my parents, they tried to return. It was a Sunday evening when I heard the knock. Soft at first, then louder. I opened the door, and there they stood, older, smaller somehow, stripped of the arrogance that had always clung to them like expensive perfume. My mother's eyes were red, my father's shoulders hunched. "Please," my mother whispered, "we want to talk." I let them in, not out of kindness, out of curiosity. They sat at the table where my grandmother once served tea. But this time there was no warmth, no porcelain cups, just silence. Finally, my father spoke. "We made a mistake." His voice cracked on the word. My mother added quickly, "We were wrong. About you." About everything. I leaned back in my chair, watching, waiting, because for decades I had begged for their approval, for just one word of love. And now they were begging me. "Please," my mother said again, reaching across the table. Her hand trembled. "We've lost everything. You're all we have left." For a moment my heart twisted. Old wounds stirred. A part of me, the little girl inside who once clung to scraps of affection, wanted to take her hand. But then I remembered. I remembered being told I wasn't worth their inheritance. I remembered Margaret's laugh when they said it, James's smirk, Robert's cruel whisper, and my father's silence, always silence. I pulled my hand back. "No," I said softly. My mother's lips parted. My father froze. "You had everything," I continued. "Money, power, status. And still, you gave me nothing. Not love, not respect, not even acknowledgement. You abandoned me for them. And now that they've fallen, you come to me?" My father tried to speak, but I didn't let him. "I am not your safety net. I am not your forgotten daughter anymore. I am my grandmother's legacy, and I will never let you use me again." The words came out calm, firm, unshakable. For once, I wasn't trembling. They were. My mother began to cry. My father looked down at his hands, ashamed, but I didn't move. I stood, walked to the door, and opened it. "Leave," I said. They hesitated. Then, slowly, they rose and walked out. The night swallowed them, and I closed the door. That was the last time I ever saw them. In that moment, something inside me broke free. The chains of wanting, the weight of their rejection, gone. I was no longer the child waiting for their love. I was the woman who didn't need it. The weeks that followed, I rebuilt, not just the cottage, myself. I planted flowers in the garden where my grandmother once knelt. I painted the walls, patched the roof, restored every corner of the house. Friends came, neighbors helped. The community embraced me in ways my own family never did, and slowly, laughter returned to my lips. The cottage became alive again, a place of warmth, of memory, of hope. Sometimes I would sit by the window and watch the sun set over the fields, and I would think of my siblings, my parents, the empire they clung to, now in ruins. And I would whisper, "This is what you threw away," because they thought the inheritance was gold and silver, mansions and companies. But the true inheritance was this: love, memory, legacy, the things you can't buy, the things you can't steal. The things my grandmother gave me freely when no one else would. One evening, I found her last letter. Hidden behind a drawer I almost never opened, her handwriting was shaky but clear. "My dear child, when they forget you, remember this. The ones who are forgotten by people are remembered by love. Take this home, take this land, take my heart, and live. That is your inheritance." Tears filled my eyes, and for the first time, I didn't cry from pain. I cried from gratitude, because in the end, my grandmother was right. The inheritance wasn't money. It was freedom. It was strength. It was the power to walk away from those who never saw my worth and to build a life that finally reflected it. And so, when people ask me if I regret exposing my family, if I regret losing them forever, I smile and I say, "You can't lose what you never truly had." The fire crackles. The night is calm. And I know this is the ending, but also the beginning, because revenge gave me justice. But my grandmother gave me life. And that is the inheritance that truly mattered.